After a childhood spent largely lived out in the countryside of my imagination, sheltered from the big harsh world, I burst into adulthood in a whirlwind of chaotic disintegrations and reintegrations of all the disparate elements that made up me. Any sense of stability, of right and wrong, of self and others, disappeared into a chaos of signs and signals that I felt powerless to interpret. As myself receded into the distance, other forces seemed to take over my head, and I was overwhelmed by a series of visions, voices and becomings that existed within me, yet seemed quite alien. At their worst, they made life unbearable, and alone in this world, convinced that anyone I told would instantly consider me crazy, I mentally and physically isolated myself from everything around me. All this did was give the worst of these rogue elements in my head the chance to take over completely. Convinced that I had descended completely into lunacy, I resolved to take my own life in order to save myself and the world from whatever possessed me. Things became a blur, but in a series of coincidences, I ended up in the psychiatric ward instead of hell. I'd be grateful if you could see this very difficult young man. He came to an appointment recently and he had very little insight into his psychotic symptoms, and I suspect he is not taking medication. Symptoms include auditory and visual hallucinations. He told me that some of them are positive, and this increases my level of doubt about his insight. I did not make any changes to medication, and I am unsure whether he is taking what he is prescribed reliably. Courses of medication were apparently the only cure. Yet on these courses of medication, though the immediate distress, the visions, the racing thoughts that unfolded with endless significance faded, so did any sense of reality and any hope of making sense of all this. The only constant in my world is change. I think the way that things have changed, I guess, which are different now from when I was younger and getting into so much trouble and ending up in hospital, was part of my recovery, was accepting that change is a constant, and change can obviously be terrifying and scary, and not knowing what's going to happen. Learning to have a more sort of mindful attitude to that, to accept things as they come, to try not to worry or fret too much about things that I can't control, to focus on things that I can, which, can be creation, can be your imagination. I grew up mainly in the countryside and always found some kind of peace in the natural world, but also like an immense violence. I don't see nature as a particularly benign thing. It can be scary. I feel like the transition into a city was a big part of why I initially got quite distressed, I guess. As part of a sort of process of recovery, I would go out walking, long walks out in the Peak District and stuff, not to sort of run away from the city, but to reflect on it from a distance. Recovery to me meant recovering the parts of myself which had been lost, partly due to my experiences and distress, but also partly due to the system which had sort of disowned them or seemed to steal them from me, turning experiences that had been with me since I was a child into symptoms, things which had endless meaning to me, I was told were meaningless. So recovery meant getting all that back. It meant working with members of staff, friends, family, members all at once, to have dialogue, to share an understanding of each of our views of the world, rather than forcing me to comply with one which was prescribed. I work for a team called the Recovery Education Unit. We're a team which specialise in training in sort of non-medical recovery approaches to mental health, and it enables me to share sort of experiences of my own, which are a kind of expertise you can't get out of a book. I'm still in touch with services now, but I work in tandem with a psychiatrist who very much understands that I have ownership of what's going on for me. He lets me use my own language to describe my own experiences, and I ask him for help rather than him intervening. I'm sure if things came to a head that services would be there to take care of me, but more to nurture me through that tough period. I see them more like coaching me back to get back on track with where I want to go with life rather than where they want me to go.